Welcome to the It's in Queens podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Simmons, and this is the only podcast that focuses on Queens. This podcast is brought to you by the Queens Economic Development Corporation and the Queens Tourism Council, which work tirelessly to showcase Queens as a destination full of unique experiences, cultural gems, and opportunities for everyone who lives here, works here, or visits from near or far. It is hard to believe, but this year marks 5 years since the COVID-19 lockdown began, an event that changed life as we knew it across the country, in New York State, and right here in New York City. The pandemic was an incredibly difficult time filled with so much loss and uncertainty, but it also brought people together in ways we never expected. Communities found new ways to connect, to support one another, and to document this unprecedented chapter in our history. As we reflect on those early days, it is important to acknowledge how much our lives have changed. The lockdown forced us to rethink how we engage with the world, from the way we work and socialize to how we tell our stories and preserve our collective memory. An organization that took on this challenge head-on was the Queens World Film Festival, which made history by being the first film festival in the world to pivot then online in response to the pandemic. On March 19, 2020, they launched 191 films from 31 nations, streaming live from their living room in Queens, ensuring that filmmakers and audiences could still connect despite the lockdown. At the same time, the Queens Memory Project at the Queens Public Library System was hard at work capturing the voices and experiences of Queens residents, creating an invaluable archive of how our borough navigated the crisis. Their efforts led to The Borough We Became, Queens Residents on Life During COVID-19, a podcast series that amplified the personal stories of resilience and adaptation during those challenging times. Fast forward 5 years later, Queens World Film Festival and Queens Memory are coming together to host a special event, Looking Back to Look Forward, a night of remembrance and connection. This takes place on March 19th at 7 o'clock at the local LIC. And this event will invite the community to reflect on the impact of the pandemic while celebrating our resilience. Attendees will experience collections from the Queens Memory Project, including excerpts from their podcast and the listening tour, which captures stories of survival and hope. There also will be an interactive mapping installation where the guests can mark where they were during the lockdown when it began and share how they stayed connected in the months that followed. To talk about this event and the important work of both organizations, I had the opportunity to recently talk with Katha Cato, Executive Director of the Queens World Film Festival, and Meryl Agish, Community Coordinator for Queens Memory at the Queens Public Library. Here's that conversation. Their efforts led to The Borough We Became, Queens Residents on Life During COVID-19, a podcast series that amplified the personal stories of resilience and adaptation during those challenging times. Fast forward 5 years later, Queens World Film Festival and Queens Memory are coming together to host a special event, Looking Back to Look Forward, a night of remembrance and connection. This takes place on March 19th at 7 o'clock at the local LIC. And this event will invite the community to reflect on the impact of the pandemic while celebrating our resilience. Attendees will experience collections from the Queens Memory Project, including excerpts from their podcast and the listening tour, which captures stories of survival and hope. Katha Cato and Meryl Agish, welcome to the It's in Queens podcast.
Thank you for having us.
So let me start off with you, Katha. Please take us back to early or mid-March of 2020, what it was like making the decision to take the Queens World Film Festival online, and what did that historic pivot mean for the festival?
What it meant, I'm going to cut to the end. What it meant is that we quickly realized the world had changed, and you can now literally do anything that you can do. If you can think of it and you can put it together, then that's what you can do, because all bets are off. So let's back up to March 13th, which was a Friday. The city started telling all of the cultural organizations that you would probably go to half capacity for the next couple of weeks. And the school was told, you might be closing. I believe they said you're probably going to be closing for about 2 weeks. That was Friday. So we were ready to open that following Thursday at the Museum of the Moving Image for our 10th anniversary. We had 17 sold out shows already in the different theaters that we had decided to be in. So what the weekend was about is finding alternative spaces to split those audiences up. We started figuring out how we would get a hold of everybody on Monday and tell them you're not going to this theater, you're going to this theater. How do we stagger? How do we do all this? We did that all weekend. Monday, we were told you are closed. And we said, no, we are not. And we had already kind of been in conversation with Discover.tv, like, if this goes that way, what can we do? And we had started to talk about it. So March 16th, that Monday, we went into high gear and we started contacting all of the filmmakers. There were 222 films we were going to screen that year. We started contacting all of them. I got a hold of 191 of them. I learned about WhatsApp. And my husband and a couple of other people were reformatting the 191 films from a version that you could screen in the Museum of the Moving Image, huge, down to something that people were going to be experiencing on this.
And you're saying
And
this meaning our phone.
my cell phone. That's right. Everything had to be EQ'd. Everything had to be changed. We slept in shifts. March 19th, Thursday night, 7:30. We stood right over there, about a foot and a half away in our living room. We broadcasted live, and I would look back at that video and I go, look, there's the sponsor we got the sponsor's logo up on our television, and the other television is turned, so there's the other sponsor. Like, even then, I was remembering what you have to do. And then away we went for 11 days. We screened 191 films for 11 days, and we got over 30,000 views.
So we're talking about the film festival, but also for any of our listeners who've not listened to my podcast before, because I have featured the Queen's Memory Project, but I would love for people, Meryl, to know a little more about the Memory Project and how it contributes to preserving the voices and stories of the people of Queens.
Sure. So we are a collaboration between the Queens Public Library and Queens College CUNY. So two of the most prominent public institutions in the borough, and Queens Memory serves as an archive for the people of Queens. And prior to the pandemic, I had joined the library and the Queen's Memory Project in December 2019. So I was just getting my bearings in the months leading up to the pandemic. But in that period, everything was being done in person, oral history interviews in person, workshops in person. Even in the week leading up to the lockdown, we were running between all kinds of programs. And I was at a community engagement conference at the Queen's Theater. Like, all of these different things were happening very much together. And we obviously had to shift everything just a week later, a few days later. But what Queen's Memory does is help people record their stories for their own purposes, or if they'd like to add to the library's archive so that in the future others can also listen to those stories, view videos, look at photos, anything like that.
So speaking of preserving memories, obviously we all have a lot of memories of what we went through during COVID. Talk a little, Meryl, about the Queen's Memory COVID-19 project and the impact of collecting oral histories during such a historic and uncertain time.
Yeah, so the library went fully remote, soon after those early days, as Katha was saying. I think by the time the public schools were closed, that's obviously when the library closed as well. So our team, like my 1,500 colleagues at the library, shifted to remote work. At that point, nobody had really done anything like that before, and we were trying to catch up on some of the backlog, thinking about what's possible to do remotely. Uh, and really just reeling from everything that was happening, of course. And in those weeks, the days really, it feels like I can remember minute by minute, we saw in the news that Queens was becoming the epicenter of the epicenter. And it wasn't until I think 2 weeks into this remote work mode that we were in, as I was talking with a lot of people, I was actually in conversation. I remember Katha, you and Preston and I had a call early uh, in the lockdown because I was just reaching out to people who I hadn't had a chance to meet yet in this still very new role that I was in with Queen's Memory. And just looking at the news, looking at my own life, being cooped up in an apartment with my husband and our then 2-year-old daughter, thinking about how are we going to process what we're going through. And I pitched an idea to our team. What if we created a place where our neighbors in Queens, who we're always in community with, but right now have to, by the nature of the time, be separated from for everybody's safety, how can we provide a place for people to process what they're going through, to record their stories, to have a place where we can gather remotely? So that's where the COVID-19 project came from. We were able to launch it in very close collaboration with Urban Archive, our tech partner, who provided this online setting for people to share and then for us to publish in relatively real time, so that we had a place for those early weeks of the pandemic, and then it has continued. We stopped collecting in the last couple of years, but the collection is also open if anybody wanted to share an interview or a photo or a remembrance of this period.
And Kathy, I want to come back to you on this because the Queens World Film Festival has evolved over the years. Talk a little about the role you see that film has played in processing collective experiences like COVID-19.
Well, since the very beginning of time, we have done these things. We have acted, we have written, we have sung, we have gathered around the fire, we have put our hands on the wall of the cave to ask each other, do you see what I see? Do you feel what I feel? And if you don't, can you just now imagine if you could see that, what that might feel like? Now you know where I am. It's just these shared stories and these ways to just stand up in the sea of humanity and say, isn't the sunrise beautiful? And have thousands of voices go, yeah. Or do you feel this sadness I feel? And have thousands of little screens go nod their heads, yes. We were connected with each other through the pandemic, through the digital portal, the digital cave, if you will. And we clung to it. Our granddaughter was 8. Our other granddaughter was 9. They're teenagers now. And we experienced a couple of Thanksgivings on someone's cell phone up on a shelf looking down as they had dinner. And I know thousands and thousands of other families experienced it the same way. So the stories that we see that are emerging over the last 2 or 3 years are really bringing that forward.
And let's get to the event. Why I definitely wanted to make sure I had the two of you on now. Looking back to look forward. Kathy, can you talk a little about what you hope, a little about the event, but also what you hope attendees can experience or will experience, the type of emotions that you think people will have when they attend this?
I hope that we remember our resilience. We remember the changes that we made, the sacrifices that we made, how we left dinner outside for our neighbors, how you called in on Preston and I, how you reached out to other people, how we marched, how we clanged, how we recorded, how we did yoga on Zoom with each other, and bring some of that humanity forward to today. Um, and remember that it's 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 just about us. It's just about the people.
And let me come back to you, Meryl. As Katha speaks, I'm sure you can recall a powerful or a surprising story that you encountered in the Queen's Memory archives from this period that you can highlight.
Oh my goodness, there are so many. We had dozens and dozens of people coming our way to record interviews. I think, it numbers in the hundreds how many interviews and stories in different digital formats that people were contributing to the COVID-19 project. One that really sticks out always for me, and I was just listening to this yesterday. um, we had a voicemail line because we knew some people are connecting with us on Instagram, some people have access to our e-newsletter, we also wanted to share a toll-free number where people could call in and leave messages, and then we would follow up with them. And a woman from Arvern called in and spoke about how she would howl at night to connect with her neighbors. So, Katha, when you mentioned the digital cave, she was talking about, the veneer of civilization is very thin. We are not so far from the cave. And she would stand outside and howl, and then she would hear, across the dunes, other people howling. And that was such a visceral story of just the need to connect, the longing to connect, and knowing that our neighbors are right next door. They're so close by. And I've been watching too some of the 7 p.m. cheer videos that we have and what that felt like and revisiting that time. That now it feels like 5 years ago is so long and also not very long at all. But the type of the day to day, those moments that helped us get through, especially the darkest months, and remembering we figured it out together, how we would be able to retain our humanity and remind each other of our humanity and to help each other, even if it's, seeing neighbors from one balcony to the next clanging a pot. And that's, I think, for the event that we're hosting together on the 19th, to revisit those moments too, and to remind ourselves we got through that time together. We will continue to get through tough times together.
Yeah, and this event is going to take place at the local in Long Island City at 13-02 44th Avenue. At the event, there's going to be something, Meryl, an opportunity for people to be able to engage with an interactive mapping installation. Can you share a little about this and what you hope people take away from that?
Sure. So we have different approaches to mapping and sharing memories, and we want to have this tactile experience for people to communicate together through this interactive map. So it's very lo-fi. It's a poster of, you see a map of the globe, and we are asking people what helped you connect, what helped you get through. Where were you during this period 5 years ago? And then you can add a brief story, a brief remembrance on a piece of paper, post it up. And then over the weeks leading up to the event, and then at the event too, people will be able to add their story and then respond to each other. And we'll be able to then, take a great photo of all the contributions that have been added over these weeks leading up to the event, and then have that preserved in the archives as well.
And Kathy, I think you want to add something to that, but I want to note that what's going through my mind in this conversation is I still cannot believe that this is the fifth anniversary, that it's been 5 years. It's just time kind of blurred a lot during the pandemic. So, Katha, I'd love for you to, compliment what Meryl just said, but also talk a little about, Queen's World has really been rooted in community storytelling, and I would love for you to then talk about how this event aligns with your mission.
Thank you. Of course. I just wanted to say that we're going to be at the local on March 4th, which is my favorite day of the year because March 4th is when you march forth. And we are going to be at the local with Queen's Memory, and we're going to be installing the map. We're going to be going live on social. We're going to be testing out the drive of the material that we're screening, and we would love to have you come down and help us start to ease back into the remembrance. So, yes, community storytelling is so huge for the Queen's World Film Festival. We represent the world. We've screened 1,979 films, and 274 of them have been from Queens. 31 of them have been by Queens school children. So we're deeply rooted in this borough, which is home to cultures that have a storytelling tradition that is thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of years old. So that we have so much to learn from the voices just walking down the streets. We're going to be screening a great film by one of our alumni, Studio with a View, chronicles the first year of the lockdown in kind of a very loving yet kind of raw way. And then we're going to wrap up the screening with the selection from the listening tour, which is something that we've been working on since 2021. We gather community members together. We ask them 4 questions about hope and resilience. They're edited in the same order. They're shot in the same order. It's very democratized so that when you turn the picture off and you just listen, you will start to identify with the voices, not the faces or the color or the whatever. And I'm going to just say that it ends with a little boy. And I watch this about 5 times a week because he's faced with a choice. And I'm not going to tell you what his choice is. And I experience it new every time I see it, because if he can make the right choice, so can I.
And Katha, before we wrap up on your side, I would love for you to just provide some information for our listeners about where they can go if they would like to attend or get involved with the Queen's World Film Festival.
So, queensworldfilmfestival.org. You can follow us on social. We're all variations of Queens Film Fest, Queens World Film Festival, Queens World Film Fest, queensworldfilmfestival.org. And if you go to special events, you'll see the page for this, and you can make a reservation through Eventbrite. It's free with a reservation, and our good friends at Metro Plus Health are supplying appetizers and wonderful deliciousness for us to make our plates and then talk to our neighbors, break bread with each other, and remember.
And Meryl, before I let you go, where can our listeners go if they want to learn more about the Queen's Memory podcast or initiative and also explore the archives, contribute their own stories?
So usually queensmemory.org is where people can go, but we're having some technical difficulties at the moment. So the best way to connect with us is over email, queensmemory@queenslibrary.org, or follow us on Instagram. We're at queensmemory.
And we all experience technical difficulties. Trust me, that's where I have my meltdowns. I'd like to thank you so much, Katha and Meryl, for appearing here on this week's It's in Queens podcast.
Thank you, Meryl. We'll see you on Tuesday.
Yeah, I can't wait. Thank you so much, Jeff.
Once again, looking back to look forward, a night of remembrance and connection takes place on Wednesday, March 19th at 7 o'clock in the evening at the local LIC in Queens. The event is free, but please, reservations are required. So one place you can go, queensworldfilmfestival.org, and you'll be able to get all the details you need and RSVP. Now, if you're looking for something else to do this month or really any month, we always have you covered here at the It's in Queens podcast. Or rather, Rob Mackay has you covered. Rob Mackay is with the Queens Economic Development Corporation and the Queens Tourism Council. And each and every week, he brings us details on some of the more exciting events that are happening in Queens. Here's this week's report.
Hi, Jeff. I want to share a very positive story this week. Real Dance New York makes a triumphant return to Queens Theater this weekend with 2 shows on Saturday and another one on Sunday. Of course, Queens Theater hosting great dance is nothing new, but this is Riol's first performance since closing due to COVID back in 2018. You know, the troupe and the owner, Pasquale Riol, they'd just spent a lot of money and created a state-of-the-art training and performance venue in Astoria, and everything was so great. And then all of a sudden, the world changed, and they were doomed. There was nothing else to do but close. But now they're back, and I've seen them in person, and Riol, they produce these unbelievable shows, beautiful costumes, and even more beautiful choreography. There's kind of a poetic energy on stage. And if you go, you'll think about the show for the rest of the night. You'll visualize it and whatnot. So call it Lazarus rising from the dead or coming full circle or anything you want. But the whole story is inspiring, as is the dance performances that they put on. So it's highly recommended, and I hope to see you there. Thanks, Jeff.
That is just a few of the things that are happening in Queens. Rob basically knows everything. He has to sift through all the events that are going on each week and each month and decide which ones he will highlight. And every week he brings us details on something that is so interesting and fun, you just want to put it right on your calendar. But the place to go to discover everything else that's on the horizon is very easy to remember. Head right over to the It's in Queens website at itsinqueens.com. And if you're interested in more business-related news, then head right over to the Queens Economic Development Corporation's website at queensny.org. And when you're there, or when you visit the itsinqueens.com website, sign up for the newsletter and then you get notified right in your inbox. When you visit any place in Queens, snap a photo, share them with us. Make sure to use the hashtag #It'sInQueens when you post on Instagram or X, because your photo could become our photo of the week. I'm your host, Jeff Simmons, and that's it for this week's It's in Queens podcast.